Welcome to the Stress Advantage, powered by Breathe to Thrive. I'm your host, Shay Patel. And this is the podcast where we explore how stress, when trained and understood, becomes one of the greatest performance advantages you can develop. On this show, we dive into the science of breathing, stress physiology and response, mental resilience, and elite performance. You'll hear conversations with athletes, coaches, scientists, executives, and high performers who are learning how to turn pressure into precision. Because stress isn't something you avoid, it's something to train, harness, and master. Let's get started. Today, we are taking on a sacred cow in the performance world. If you turn on an NFL game, walk into a CrossFit box, or watch a high rocks competition right now, you're going to see it on almost every athlete's face, the nasal strip. Everyone is plastering these across their noses. The prevailing belief, if I open my nasal passages, I get more oxygen. If I get more oxygen, I crush my competition. But here on the show, we care about what actually moves the needle under extreme stress, not what looks cool. Today, we are asking the million-dollar question. Do nasal strips actually improve athletic performance? Or are we looking at a psychological band-aid that changes how breathing feels, but does absolutely nothing for your physiology? In this episode, we're going to tear this down. We'll cover the anatomy of nasal airflow, exactly what the peer-reviewed research says. I want to tap into one of my favorites, Brian Mackenzie's breathing gear system, and how you should actually be using nasal breathing during your zone 2 cardio. Let's start with basic physiology. Your nose is not designed for maximal ventilation. It is essentially an HVAC system for your lungs. Its primary roles are filtering, humidifying, and regulating the temperature of the air. As Dr. John Goulard's research shows, nasal breathing also pools nitric oxide in the nasal cavity, which is a potent vasodilator that helps open your blood vessels. But here's a structural problem for athletes. The narrowest part of your airway is right at the front, called the nasal valve. This tiny region accounts for 50 to 70% of your total airway resistance. When you inhale with massive force during a sprint, the negative pressure literally sucks your nostrils inward. This is called nasal valve collapse. Nasal strips work by mechanically acting like a scaffold, pulling the nostrils outward to fight that collapse. So external nasal dilators, the strips, simply increase nasal airflow. In clinical terms, they increase your peak nasal inspiratory flow, PNIF. Think of it like putting a slightly wider pipe on your kitchen sink. Yes, more water can flow through the pipe, but if the water pressure from the city, which represents your heart and lungs, stays exactly the same, it doesn't matter how wide the pipe is. Improving airflow through the nose does not mean your muscles are suddenly extracting more oxygen. There's a lot of research out here. Don't just take my word for it. Let's look at a few peer-reviewed research articles. The first one, from Griffin and his colleagues, ramped up cycling ergs. They put athletes on bikes and ramped up the resistance until they tapped out. They measured VO2 max, anaerobic threshold, and maximum power output. The result, zero difference. The nasal strip didn't generate a single extra watt of power. In another study, in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, Thomas and his team tested athletes during high-intensity anaerobic treadmill running and their recovery. They measured heart rate, total ventilation, and oxygen consumption. Again, no significant physiological difference. And lastly, in endurance athletes, a 2017 study in the journal Auris Nasus Larynx evaluated external nasal dilators. They found that while nasal resistance dropped, cardiorespiratory capacity remained exactly the same. The data is screaming at us. You can widen the nasal valve all you want, but your cardiovascular performance remains unchanged. So why do athletes start breathing through their mouths? Is it a weakness? No, it's basic math. At rest, you breathe about 5 to 7 liters of air per minute. During moderate exercise, that jumps to 30 to 50 liters. But at max effort, athletes are moving 100 to 150 liters of air per minute. Your nose physically can't process 150 liters of air in a minute. When you hit high intensity, CO2 spikes in your blood. Your brainstem's respiratory control center, a mechanism heavily studied by neuroscientists like Dr. Jack Feldman, senses this CO2 buildup and panics. It automatically recruits your mouth to dump the exhaust being the CO2. Gasping at the end of a heavy set isn't bad mechanics, it is survival biology. To illustrate when the nose stops working, we use the breathing gear system, a framework popularized by human performance specialist Brian Mackenzie. Think of your body like a manual transmission. Gear 1, easy nasal breathing, equal and easy nose-only breathing. You're going to be doing this 60% plus of the training time, up to a nice, comfortable walk. In Gear 2, power nasal breathing, you've increased your nose-only breathing, so it's a little bit faster, and we're looking at less than 25% of the training time. Gear 3 is in through the nose, out through the mouth. Here, we're looking at a 3 to 4 second breathing cycles. The gear is a transitional gear to up or down shift. Typically can be used when you need to get back to a baseline, because in exercise, the minute we start to get out of gear 3 and into 4 and 5, our goal is to always get back to gear 3, in through the nose, out through the mouth. A lot of people will stay breathing through their mouth, and this is going to make it a little bit more difficult for you to recover. Gear 4 is when you go mouth breathing only. This should look like something like 10 to 25% of your training time, right? So you're at your heart rate zone of like a 4 or 5. And the last one, which would be power mouth breathing, you're going to be using 5% of your training time, explosive work, when your heart rate's in like zone 5. If you think about it, at the end of a workout, CrossFit workout like Fran, right, it's virtually impossible for you to finish a Fran in under 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever you may do, and do that while breathing through your nose, right? It's just the amount of work done demands that you're increased breathing and you're breathing from mouth to mouth. It's normal. But our goal is to get back down as soon as we're done, to get down to gear 3, in through the nose, out through the mouth, to get out of that sympathetic state and into the parasympathetic state. If we were thinking about swimming, think of Mackenzie's gear 3 as a gear 1 in swimming. His gear 4 would be gear 2 for swimming, and his gear 5 would be gear 3 for swimming. So it's virtually impossible for you to swim at a fast, explosive pace, or even run for that matter, in through the nose, out through the mouth, or just nasal breathing. But by working with Breathe to Thrive method, we lean into the Breathe to Thrive rate of perceived stress scale and the methodology to condition your primary and secondary respiratory muscles to build a more versatile, adaptive rib cage. By syncing the mind with the mechanics of the breath, we optimize your rate and depth for any scenario, whether you're crushing a PR or managing a high-stress moment. It's about mastering the central governing theory, teaching your brain that you have the capacity to go further, faster, and longer. Now, how can we build this? One of these things is by doing zone 2 training. We can use nasal breathing as a superpower. Zone 2 is your aerobic base. Biologically, you are working at about a 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. This is where you build mitochondrial density and train your body to oxidize fat for fuel. During zone 2, you should be entirely in Mackenzie's gear 1 or gear 2. This is where you want your mouth shut. Nasal breathing during zone 2 acts as a natural governor. It forces you to stay the correct intensity. If you have to open your mouth, you're going too hard and shifting out of zone 2. By keeping your mouth closed, you're pulling nitric oxide into the lungs, maintaining a mild parasympathetic tone, and building massive aerobic efficiency. When it comes to zone 2, I'm just scratching the surface here. But listen, We're going to go way deeper into this on our next episode. I'm bringing Darnell Hardy, a dear friend of mine, on the podcast. Darnell is an absolute master when it comes to aerobic capacity and VO2 max protocols. We're going to break down the exact protocols, programming you need to build an unbreakable aerobic engine. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss that one. Back to nasal strips. If nasal strips don't improve performance in gears 3 and 4, why do athletes still wear them? Let's consider perception of airflow. It simply feels better. When air hits the nasal mucosa faster, the brain perceives less resistance. We could talk about reduced dyspnea. Studies show that while performance doesn't increase, the feeling of breathlessness, dyspnea, goes down. The struggle feels less intense. Then there's a placebo effect. In the 1% of elite sports, confidence is a performance enhancer. If a strip gives an athlete the psychological comfort to push 2% harder, they'll wear it. Now, there is a medical exception. There is one caveat. A recent study in the American Journal of Otolaryngology found that nasal dilators do improve performance for athletes who have a compromised structural nasal valve, like a deviated septum or a previously broken nose. If your anatomy is compromised, a strip gets you back to baseline. If you're healthy, it doesn't do as much for your output. So let's bring it all together. What should you actually focus on for the stress advantage? Ditch the hacks and master the fundamentals. Train your diaphragm. Build your CO2 tolerance. Use strict nasal breathing to build your zone 2 aerobic base. But recognize that when it's time to redline, your mouth is going to open and no piece of tape on your nose is going to save you. Your performance limiter is your cardiovascular engine and your muscular endurance, not your nostrils. So one of the things that I'd like to know is, how do you feel during your workouts? Do you recognize or are you aware when you're actually switching gears, when you're going from a nose mouth to mouth mouth? Or do you start your workouts nasal breathing and then start going through those gears? It's really important that we understand our body, and it's really important that you note these things. You're not going to be checking in on these things during an actual competition or in the middle of the workout. You're going to train these things separately so that when you are working out, you can apply them directly to the moment. So I want you to go out there. I want you to train hard, but really focus on what's happening to your body. What is your body telling you, right? When we go to work out, it's not just about the clock. It's not just about getting the reps. It's not just about completing the competition and winning. It's also about, what are we learning? What is our body telling us? And how can we adjust that for the next workout, for the next competition, or for the next stressful event? Thanks for listening to The Stress Advantage, powered by Breathe to Thrive. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave 5-star rating, and share this podcast with someone who wants to perform at a higher level. Your support helps us continue bringing you conversations and insight on breathing, stress response, and high performance. And remember, pressure is inevitable. Your response is trainable. Train your breath, train your mind, and turn stress into your advantage. Just a little bit of the legal stuff. This show is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. I'm a human performance coach, not a doctor. Always consult a physician before starting any breathwork or physical activity. Never practice breathing techniques while driving, swimming, or operating heavy machinery. Only practice in a safe, stationary environment. Train hard, but train safe. I'm Shea Patel. Turn the pressure into your advantage. Now let's get to work.